Imagine standing in the throne room of heaven, watching the most beautiful angel ever created bow before God's eternal light. But this time, he never rises in rebellion. Picture a world where the serpent never slithered into Eden, where every prayer echoes through realms unchallenged by darkness, where miracles flow like rivers because no demonic force exists to dam their power. What if the war in heaven never happened because Satan never fell? Welcome to our channel, where we explore forbidden questions and hidden truths of history, religion, and the unknown. If you love journeys that challenge what you thought you knew, make sure to join us, because today's story may change the way you see everything. Tonight, we step into an alternate reality where the morning star remained faithful, where heaven's perfect order never shattered, and where humanity's story unfolded under skies that knew no shadow of evil. But be warned, this tale of eternal light may reveal truths more shocking than any darkness we've ever known. Chapter 1: The Throne Room Eternal. Before time began, before stars learned to shine, there existed a realm of perfect beauty beyond human imagination. In heaven's crystal halls, where walls pulse with living light and air itself sings with divine harmony, stood the greatest of all created beings. Lucifer, the light-bearer, spread wings that captured and reflected God's glory like a prism split sunlight into rainbow fire. His voice led choruses of 10,000 angels, each note pure enough to make diamonds weep. Around the eternal throne, seraphim covered their faces, while cherubim proclaimed holiness without end. This was the original design: perfect order, flawless worship, unbroken love flowing between creator and creation. Every angel knew their place, cherished their purpose, and found joy in service that would last forever. No whisper of discontent had ever disturbed this sacred symphony. In this timeline, that whisper never came. The thought that would poison paradise, the pride that would shatter heaven's peace, the rebellion that would split eternity itself, none of it ever stirred in Lucifer's perfect heart. Instead, he remained what he was created to be: the faithful morning star, forever reflecting divine light without claiming it as his own. But if Satan never fell, if no war ever raged in heaven's courts, then everything we think we know about God, humanity, and the cosmic battle between good and evil must be completely rewritten. The story you're about to hear will challenge every assumption about faith, free will, and the very nature of divine love itself. Chapter 2: The Whisper That Never Came. In the shadow of eternity, there came a moment that would have changed everything. But in our timeline, this moment passes like a gentle breeze. Lucifer stands before the throne, his beauty unmatched, his power second only to God himself. The seed of pride that should have taken root in his heart withers before it can grow. Perhaps it was a vision of the destruction his rebellion would cause. Maybe God showed him the countless souls that would suffer if he chose the path of darkness. Or perhaps love itself proved stronger than pride, humility deeper than ambition. Whatever stayed his hand, whatever kept his heart pure, Lucifer chose differently. The whisper of, "I will be like the Most High," never escaped his lips. Instead, he bowed deeper, worshipped truer, and embraced his role as the greatest servant, rather than seeking to become a false god. Heaven's hierarchy remained unbroken. Michael the archangel never drew his sword in cosmic battle. Gabriel's trumpet never called angels to choose sides in celestial war. The morning star continued to herald each new day in paradise, his light unmarred by shadow, his song untainted by rebellion. But this choice, this moment of remaining faithful, would echo through all creation in ways that even angels couldn't foresee. For if Satan never fell, then the entire story of humanity, of sin, of redemption itself, must unfold along paths no prophet ever dreamed of walking. The question haunts the heavens. In a universe without true evil, what becomes of true good? When there is no darkness to choose against, what does it mean to choose the light? Chapter 3. Earth without the tempter. The Garden of Eden blooms under morning sun, its rivers flowing with crystal water, its trees heavy with fruit that tastes like joy itself. Adam walks among the animals, naming them with words that capture their very essence, while Eve dances through flower fields that bow to her passing. But something is different in this paradise. No serpent coils around the tree of knowledge, for the devil who would possess it still serves faithfully in heaven's courts. The forbidden fruit hangs untouched, not because it lacks temptation, but because temptation itself takes a different form. Adam and Eve still possess free will. They must, for love cannot exist without choice. But their test comes not from outside deception, but from within themselves. The question of whether to trust God completely or seek knowledge on their own terms still whispers in their hearts. But now it's their own curiosity speaking, not a fallen angel's lies. They stand before the tree, hands almost touching its branches, wrestling with desires that are purely human. Will they choose to trust their Creator's wisdom, or will they reach for understanding that was never meant to be theirs? The choice remains theirs alone, but now there's no serpent's silver tongue to tip the scales toward destruction. In this moment, humanity's fate hangs in the balance, not because of demonic manipulation, but because of something far more mysterious: the genuine freedom to choose between obedience and independence, between faith and self-determination. What they decide will shape not just their own destiny, but the entire relationship between heaven and earth in a universe where evil has no supernatural champion. Chapter 4. The Ripple of Righteousness. When Satan remains loyal, heaven's gates swing wide open. Angels descend like falling stars, but these are stars that heal rather than destroy. They walk openly among humans, their wings casting shadows of blessing on everything they touch. Cities rise faster than ever imagined because divine architects guide human hands. Pyramids align perfectly with celestial bodies because their builders receive blueprints written in starlight. The Tower of Babel reaches toward heaven, not in arrogance, but in invitation, and God responds by coming down to visit rather than scatter. Children grow up seeing angels on street corners, sharing bread with beings of pure light, learning wisdom from voices that echo with eternity. Farmers plant seeds blessed by cherubim and harvest crops that could feed nations. Sailors navigate by seraphim who part storms and calm seas with songs of peace. This is civilization under constant heavenly influence, where miracles become as common as sunrise, where prayer is always answered because there's no demonic interference to block divine communication. Wars end quickly because angels step between opposing armies, their presence so overwhelming that weapons fall from trembling hands. But something unexpected begins to happen. In a world where divine intervention is guaranteed, where prayers are always answered and miracles never cease, humanity starts to change in ways that even heaven didn't fully anticipate. Some humans grow closer to God than ever before, their hearts expanding to contain divine love. But others begin to take miracles for granted, treating angels like servants and expecting heaven to solve every problem they create. The question that begins to whisper through paradise is this: does constant divine presence create better humans, or does it make them dependent children who never learn to truly choose good for its own sake? Chapter 5: The God-Man Paradox. In the courts of heaven, a conversation takes place that shakes the very foundations of eternity. The Father, Son, and Holy Spirit gather in council, their unity perfect, but their decision unprecedented. If Satan never fell, if humanity needs no rescue from demonic deception, does the Son still need to become flesh? The theological earthquake rumbles through dimensions unknown to human thought. Jesus Christ, the Lamb slain before the foundation of the world, faces a universe where his sacrifice might serve a different purpose entirely. For even without Satan's influence, human hearts still struggle with pride, selfishness, and the gap between mortal flesh and divine holiness. Perhaps the incarnation happens not to defeat Satan, but to bridge the chasm between finite and infinite love. Maybe Christ comes not as warrior, but as teacher, not to die for sins, but to show humanity how to live beyond the limitations of earthly existence. Or perhaps something even more mysterious unfolds. In a world where heaven touches earth so directly, maybe humanity evolves spiritually at speeds that require divine guidance from within human form. Christ's mission transforms from redemption to transformation, from salvation to elevation. The ripples of this decision spread across time itself. Christmas changes from celebrating rescue to celebrating union. Easter shifts from victory over death to victory over the limitations that separate mortal from divine. The cross becomes not a symbol of sacrifice, but a bridge between worlds. But the most shocking possibility remains unspoken in heaven's halls. What if, in preventing Satan's fall, God set in motion events that require an even greater demonstration of divine love than anyone ever imagined? What if keeping Satan loyal creates challenges that only the incarnation can solve? Chapter 6: Prophets without opposition. Moses stands before Pharaoh's throne, but this time, no court magicians challenge divine power with demonic tricks. Aaron's staff swallows their rods immediately because no fallen angels empower false miracles. The plagues come swiftly, each one undeniable proof of divine authority, and Pharaoh releases Israel after just 3 supernatural demonstrations. The Red Sea parts not in desperate flight, but in triumphant procession, with angels visible on either side, holding back the waters, while Israel marches through on dry ground. Egyptian chariots stop at the water's edge because their riders see heaven's army and choose worship over warfare. Elijah's confrontation on Mount Carmel becomes a celebration rather than a contest. The prophets of Baal abandon their false god the moment fire falls from heaven because no demons prop up their deception. The entire nation turns to worship the true God in a single day, and Israel becomes the spiritual center of the ancient world overnight. Isaiah's visions flow freely to eager ears because no spiritual blindness clouds human understanding. His prophecies of peace begin fulfilling themselves immediately as nations seek Israel's God rather than their own glory. The suffering servant passages transform into descriptions of humanity's elevation rather than Christ's sacrifice. Daniel serves not in exile, but as honored advisor to kings who recognize divine wisdom when they see it. His visions of future kingdoms reveal not coming conflicts, but the gradual spread of heaven's influence across all nations. But the most profound change comes in how these prophets see themselves. without opposition to overcome, without persecution to endure, without false prophets to contest. They become teachers rather than warriors, guides rather than rebels. Their messages shift from warnings of judgment to invitations to greater intimacy with the divine. The question that haunts their success: in a world without spiritual opposition, do prophets still shape character through struggle, or does easy victory create a different kind of faith entirely? Chapter 7: Religions Without a Rival. In India, a young prince sits beneath a Bodhi tree seeking enlightenment, but his meditation is interrupted by angels who offer direct answers to his deepest questions. The Buddha's awakening comes not through solitary struggle, but through heavenly tutoring, and his teachings spread like wildfire because miracles accompany every sermon. Buddhism evolves not as escape from suffering, but as embrace of divine joy. Karma becomes not cosmic justice, but divine mercy, guiding souls toward perfect love. The Eightfold Path leads not away from desire, but toward desire for God alone. In the mountains of Tibet, monks discover that their prayers for compassion summon actual angels who teach them to heal with touch and speak with spirits of light. Meditation becomes conversation with heaven rather than emptiness seeking. Hinduism transforms as every god reveals itself as a facet of the one true divine. Krishna's flute calls humans not to illusion, but to reality beyond physical sight. The Vedas rewrite themselves as scribes, record new revelations that flow like rivers from heaven's throne. In China, Confucius receives wisdom not just from human observation, but from angelic counselors who help him design social order that reflects heaven's harmony. Taoism becomes not the way of nature, but the way of divine nature, expressing itself through creation. But the most shocking transformation comes in how these different traditions begin to merge. Without demonic deception to create false divisions, all spiritual seeking leads to the same source. Religious wars become impossible when every sincere seeker encounters the same divine love, just described in different words. Yet questions arise. Does this unity create a beautiful tapestry of worship, or does it erase the unique gifts each culture brings to understanding the divine mystery? When all paths lead to the same God, do they still remain paths worth walking? Chapter 8: The Roman Empire's Divine Turn. Emperor Nero stands on his palace balcony, watching Rome burn. But this time, the fire goes out instantly as angels pour rain from cloudless skies. Christian prisoners in the Colosseum walk away unharmed as lions bow down and gladiators lay down their weapons, overwhelmed by visible divine presence. The persecution ends not in gradual tolerance, but in immediate transformation. Roman soldiers who came to arrest apostles become their bodyguards after witnessing miracles that make their gods look like children's toys. The Pantheon empties as Romans flock to hear Peter preach with power that shakes marble columns. Emperor Constantine's conversion happens 3 centuries early when his predecessor sees angels fighting alongside Christian legions. The Edict of Milan becomes unnecessary because Rome converts to Christianity in a single generation, not through force, but through undeniable divine demonstration. Roman law transforms overnight to reflect divine commandments, but not through oppression, through citizens who can't ignore the justice and mercy they see flowing from heaven. Slavery begins ending as masters see angels weeping over their treatment of fellow humans. The empire's roads, built to move legions, now carry missionaries whose journeys are protected by visible heavenly escorts. Roman engineering, guided by angelic architects, creates cities that seem to glow with inner light. The aqueducts flow not just with water, but with healing that transforms entire populations. But the most profound change comes in how power itself operates. Emperors find they cannot rule through fear when their subjects have seen perfect love. Government becomes service rather than dominance. Law becomes guidance rather than punishment. Yet a troubling question emerges. In an empire converted by overwhelming divine display rather than personal choice, what happens to the human heart's need to freely choose good? Does enforced righteousness create genuine virtue, or something else entirely? Chapter 9. Medieval Miracles Unchallenged. The Dark Ages never come. Instead of barbarian invasions, Europe sees heavenly visitations that transform tribal warriors into protectors of divine peace. Monasteries become centers not just of learning, but of visible angelic activity, where monks transcribe books dictated by seraphim and illuminate manuscripts with ink that glows like liquid starlight. The church never falls into corruption because demonic temptation cannot touch hearts constantly purified by divine presence. Popes serve as true shepherds, their authority coming not from political power, but from miracles that accompany their every blessing. Cathedrals rise not through decades of labor, but through months of angelic construction, their spires reaching heights that defy earthly engineering. Crusades become unnecessary because Jerusalem remains under visible heavenly protection. Muslim and Christian pilgrims arrive together to witness angels guarding the holy places, their religious differences dissolving in the face of divine love that transcends all boundaries. The feudal system transforms into something unprecedented. Kingdoms where kings serve as divine representatives, not through claim, but through confirmed calling. Peasants work fields blessed by cherubim, where single seeds produce harvests that could feed armies. Nobles compete not for land, but for opportunities to serve the least among them. Universities become extensions of heaven's library, where students learn directly from angelic teachers who explain mysteries of creation with authority beyond human wisdom. Science and faith unite perfectly because every discovery confirms divine design. Every experiment reveals new aspects of God's creative genius. But even in this golden age of faith, unexpected shadows begin to form. Some humans, surrounded by constant miracles, start to lose their sense of wonder. Others begin to demand that heaven solve every problem, forgetting how to develop their own divine-given abilities. The question that troubles even the angels: does perfect divine presence perfect human nature, or does it prevent humans from growing into the spiritual maturity that struggle can provide? Chapter 10. The Reformation that never needed to happen. In Wittenberg, Martin Luther picks up his hammer and nails, but then sets them down unused. There are no theses to post because the church needs no reformation when Satan never corrupted it. Instead of protesting error, Luther finds himself deepening truth, working alongside bishops to explore new dimensions of divine love, revealed through constant heavenly communication. The Catholic Church operates with transparency impossible on earth alone, because angels serve as witnesses to every decision, every blessing, every act of service. Cardinals make choices guided by visible seraphim, their debates settled not by politics, but by direct divine counsel that leaves no room for human manipulation. Protestant Reformation becomes Catholic transformation as the Church evolves beyond any single human structure. Denominations never splinter apart, because the truth they all seek stands visibly among them, speaking with one voice that harmonizes all sincere worship. The printing press spreads not competing interpretations of Scripture, but new revelations that pour from heaven like daily bread. The Bible expands as prophets in every generation add chapters dictated by the same Spirit who inspired the originals, each edition confirmed by signs and wonders that silence all doubt. European politics transforms as kingdoms unite under divine guidance rather than fragment through religious war. The 30 Years' War never happens because there's nothing to fight about when God's will is clearly known to all. Colonial expansion becomes missions of blessing rather than conquest as European explorers carry visible divine presence to new lands. But the most profound change comes in how Christianity itself evolves. Without opposition to define itself against, without heresy to correct, without persecution to strengthen it, the faith grows in directions no theologian ever imagined. It becomes less about believing the right things and more about becoming the right kind of beings, humans who can hold increasing measures of divine love without burning up. Yet questions linger in heaven's halls. Has Christianity become too easy? Does faith require difficulty to develop depth? And what happens to the human soul when every prayer is answered exactly as requested? Chapter 11. The Forbidden Texts That Were Never Hidden. In the great libraries of Alexandria and Constantinople, scrolls that should have been burned by fearful church leaders instead line shelves like treasures waiting to be discovered. The Book of Enoch, once considered too dangerous for common believers, becomes required reading in every Christian household because angels themselves confirm its every word. Children grow up learning about the Watchers, not as fallen beings to fear, but as cautionary examples of what happens when immortal beings abandon their divine assignments. The detailed descriptions of heaven's structure, the names of angels, the mechanics of divine justice, all of it flows freely through human civilization because no demonic force exists to twist sacred knowledge into dangerous superstition. The Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary, the Acts of John, documents that church councils once declared heretical, now serve as additional windows into Christ's ministry. These texts reveal conversations Jesus had with disciples that never made it into the traditional Bible, teachings about direct divine communion that become standard Christian practice. Gnostic writings about secret knowledge transform from forbidden mysticism into public education. Every believer learns to access personal revelation directly from heaven because the dangers that once made such practices risky simply don't exist. Prayer becomes conversation, meditation becomes visitation, and worship becomes participation in divine activities. But the most shocking discovery comes when scholars realize these lost texts were never really lost at all. Angels had been preserving perfect copies in heavenly archives, waiting for the day when humanity could handle their contents without demonic corruption, twisting their meaning into spiritual poison. Seminary students now study from curriculums that include angelic testimonies, seraphic poetry, and cherubic mathematics that explain how worship itself maintains the structure of reality. Every theological question finds its answer not in human debate, but in divine explanation delivered by beings who watched creation unfold. Yet even paradise raises questions. When all mysteries are revealed, what happens to faith? Does perfect knowledge create perfect love, or does it eliminate the trust that makes love possible? Chapter 12. The Gnostic Revolution. Christianity explodes beyond all institutional boundaries as direct divine knowledge becomes every believer's birthright. No longer do priests serve as mediators between God and humanity. Every person can access heavenly wisdom as directly as breathing air or drinking water. Church buildings transform from places of gathering into launching pads for spiritual exploration. Sunday services become report sessions where believers share the divine revelations they received during the week, comparing visions and testing spiritual experiences against the continuous flow of angelic confirmation. The ancient Gnostic emphasis on personal divine experience merges seamlessly with Orthodox Christian doctrine because no demonic deception exists to twist mystical encounters into spiritual pride or dangerous delusion. Contemplative prayer becomes as natural as conversation because heaven eagerly participates in every sincere attempt at divine connection. Monasteries evolve into training centers where ordinary believers learn to sustain longer periods of divine communion. What once required decades of disciplined practice now takes months to master because angelic tutors accelerate spiritual development with patient, perfect instruction. The institutional church doesn't disappear, but transforms into something unprecedented, a network of divine communication that spans continents. Bishops become coordinators of revelation rather than controllers of doctrine, their authority flowing not from political appointment, but from confirmed spiritual gifting that manifests in undeniable, miraculous ability. But the most radical change comes in how Christian unity finally achieves what centuries of councils and creeds could never accomplish. When every believer can verify divine truth through direct heavenly contact, theological disputes resolve instantly. The Trinity stops being a doctrine to defend and becomes a relationship to experience as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit interact personally with human hearts. Yet troubling questions emerge. Does universal access to divine revelation eliminate the need for spiritual growth? If everyone can hear heaven perfectly, what motivates the pursuit of holiness? And does perfect spiritual democracy create perfect spiritual community? Or does it scatter into countless individual relationships with God that lack corporate unity? Chapter 13. Islam's Impossible Birth. In the caves outside Mecca, Muhammad ibn Abdullah sits in meditation, but the Arabia he inhabits has been transformed by 7 centuries of uncontested Christian miracles. Trade routes carry not just goods, but testimonies of angelic visitations that make pagan worship seem like children playing with toys. The revelation that comes to Muhammad arrives not as correction to corrupted Christianity, but as completion of truths already flowering across Arabian soil. The Quran speaks not against the Trinity, but explains how divine unity expresses itself in ways that encompass both Christian and Islamic understanding, because the same angels who guided Jesus now guide Muhammad. Mecca's pilgrimage transforms as Christian and Muslim seekers arrive together to witness divine presence that transcends their different forms of worship. The Kaaba becomes not a symbol of division, but a meeting place where heaven touches earth so tangibly that sectarian differences dissolve in the face of shared divine encounter. The rapid spread of Islam happens not through conquest, but through invitation, as Arabian believers share spiritual experiences that complement rather than compete with Christian testimony. Byzantine and Persian empires, already transformed by centuries of heavenly intervention, welcome these new prophetic voices as additions to divine revelation rather than threats to established order. But the most profound change comes in how Muhammad himself understands his calling. Without centuries of Christian-Islamic conflict to anticipate, without demonic forces stirring religious hatred, his message emphasizes unity and completion rather than correction and replacement. The Quran becomes an additional book in humanity's expanding divine library, rather than a final revelation that closes all others. Desert warfare between faiths becomes desert conferences where scholars from different traditions compare revelations and discover harmonies that strengthen both. The great Islamic universities of Baghdad and Cordoba open their doors to Christian mystics and Jewish sages, creating unprecedented centers of unified spiritual learning. Yet questions echo across these transformed lands. Does religious harmony create deeper truth or diluted conviction? When all sincere faith leads to divine encounter, do specific beliefs still matter? Or does everything become equally valid in the face of universal spiritual access? Chapter 14: Eastern Wisdom Meets Western Truth. Under the Bodhi tree, Siddhartha Gautama achieves enlightenment, but his awakening includes visions of the Christ who walks in other lands, and angels who explain how Buddhist compassion and Christian love flow from the same divine source. The Buddha's first sermon addresses not just the Four Noble Truths, but the unity of all spiritual seeking when guided by heaven's light. Buddhist missionaries traveling the Silk Road encounter Christian monks, but instead of competing for converts, they discover their meditation practices and contemplative prayers lead to identical divine encounters. Monasteries begin sharing techniques as Buddhist mindfulness enhances Christian contemplation, and Christian devotion deepens Buddhist compassion. In India, Hindu sages receive visions that explain how Krishna's teachings about divine love and Christ's teachings about divine love describe the same eternal reality expressed through different cultural languages. The Bhagavad Gita becomes required reading in Christian seminaries, while Christian mystical writings find honored places in Hindu ashrams. The caste system begins dissolving as Hindu believers, guided by both ancient scriptures and angelic visitations, recognize divine equality in all souls. Untouchables become spiritual teachers when heaven clearly demonstrates that divine favor flows to humble hearts, regardless of social position. Tibetan Buddhism transforms as monks discover their prayers for universal compassion, summon actual angels who teach advanced techniques for healing physical and spiritual suffering. The Dalai Lama tradition evolves into a bridge-building ministry that connects Eastern and Western spirituality through shared divine experience. But the most remarkable development comes in the great spiritual universities that emerge where trade routes intersect. Buddhist logic and Christian theology, Hindu philosophy and Islamic law, Taoist naturalism and Jewish wisdom all merge into comprehensive approaches to divine truth that no single tradition could have developed alone. Yet profound questions arise. Does spiritual unity create a richer understanding of God, or does it blur the unique revelations each tradition was meant to preserve? When all paths lead to heaven, do the individual paths still maintain their transformative power, or does everything become a pleasant but shallow spiritual soup? Chapter 15: The Heresy Trials That Never Were. In the Vatican's secret archives, files labeled Inquisition remain forever empty because no heretical teachings ever take root when demons cannot plant seeds of spiritual deception. Instead of hunting false doctrine, church investigators spend their time documenting new miracles and verifying authentic prophetic revelations that pour from heaven like spring rain. Galileo Galilei presents his telescope discoveries to church leaders who celebrate each new wonder of divine creation rather than fearing threats to established doctrine. Cardinals gather around his instruments to observe Jupiter's moons with joy, recognizing that a bigger universe only reveals a bigger God whose creative power exceeds their wildest theological imagination. The scientific revolution accelerates under church endorsement as angels guide researchers toward discoveries that demonstrate, rather than challenge, divine design. Isaac Newton develops his laws of motion with seraphic consultation that shows him how divine intelligence maintains cosmic order through principles elegant beyond human invention. Copernicus publishes his heliocentric model not in fearful secrecy, but with Vatican blessing, because church leaders receive visions confirming that Earth's movement around the sun reflects humanity's proper relationship to divine truth, always orbiting around God, rather than assuming they are the center of existence. Witch trials never happen because real spiritual discernment, guided by angelic wisdom, easily distinguishes between mental illness, natural phenomena, and genuine spiritual gifting. Instead of burning women accused of supernatural power, communities learn to recognize and nurture authentic divine gifts while providing compassionate care for those struggling with earthly difficulties. The index of forbidden books remains blank because no human knowledge conflicts with divine truth when devils don't twist learning into prideful rebellion against heaven. Scientific discoveries become occasions for worship. Philosophical advances become invitations to deeper theological understanding. But even this paradise of learning raises unexpected questions. Does conflict-free knowledge develop character the way struggle with difficult truths once did? When every discovery confirms faith instead of challenging it, does human intellectual growth reach the same depths it might achieve through wrestling with genuine mysteries?
Chapter 16: The Digital Age of Divine.
Silicon Valley's greatest innovation isn't artificial intelligence or virtual reality. It's PrayerNet, a global communication system that allows instant connection with heaven itself. Smartphones become prayer devices that receive actual angelic responses in real time, turning every conversation into potential divine encounter. Social media platforms transform from spaces of division into networks of spiritual sharing, where believers post daily miracle testimonies with video evidence that skeptics cannot debunk. Instagram becomes a gallery of answered prayers, Facebook a forum for divine discussion, and Twitter a stream of prophetic updates flowing from heaven to earth at the speed of light. Artificial intelligence struggles to process data in a world where miracles happen hourly and statistical models break down under the weight of constant divine intervention. Machine learning algorithms designed to predict human behavior crash when confronted with decisions guided by angelic counsel that operates beyond computational logic. Virtual reality companies attempt to recreate heavenly experiences, but their best technology pales compared to the actual divine encounters available to any believer who asks for spiritual vision. Gaming transforms from escape into training as developers create simulations that help users prepare for real spiritual adventures they'll experience in prayer and worship. The internet becomes humanity's global nervous system, connecting not just people, but the entire planet to heaven's communication network. Cybersecurity takes on new meaning as programmers work to maintain systems that carry divine data alongside human information. But the most profound change comes in how technology serves spiritual rather than material advancement. Medical devices become healing instruments that angels operate to cure diseases instantly. Transportation systems run on divine energy that never depletes. Communication networks carry not just information, but actual spiritual presence that transforms everyone who connects. Yet troubling questions emerge in this digital paradise. Does instant access to divine communication create spiritual maturity or spiritual dependency? When every device becomes a prayer tool, do humans lose the ability to find God in silence and simplicity? Chapter 17: Politics in Paradise. Democracy faces its greatest challenge not from dictatorship, but from theocracy, as voters struggle to maintain human government when God's will is clearly known through angelic proclamation. Election campaigns become redundant when heaven endorses candidates whose hearts align with divine purpose, their qualifications confirmed through miraculous signs that no political spin can counterfeit. The United Nations transforms into something unprecedented, a global council where representatives don't debate policy but coordinate the implementation of divine directives delivered through angelic messengers who attend every session. International law becomes divine law, and enforcement happens through heavenly intervention rather than military pressure. Dictators find their power evaporating not through revolution, but through divine opposition that makes tyranny impossible to maintain. Secret police discover they cannot hide their actions from angels who testify against oppression in courts, where truth-telling spirits make lies physically impossible to speak. Local governments operate as divine distribution centers, where mayors and governors serve as coordinators of miraculous provision rather than managers of limited resources. Taxation becomes voluntary because communities receive everything they need through prayer, and public service transforms from career ambition into spiritual calling, confirmed through supernatural gifting. The stock market stabilizes at levels that ensure universal prosperity because angelic economists design trading systems that eliminate both poverty and excessive wealth. Currency becomes unnecessary in many regions where divine provision flows so abundantly that money serves only as a tool for organizing rather than limiting access to necessities. But the most shocking development comes in how human leadership evolves when divine guidance is constant and clear. Political skills transform from persuasion and compromise toward translation and implementation, helping humans understand and apply heavenly directives in earthly circumstances. Yet fundamental questions shake even heaven's halls. Does divine governance create perfect human society, or eliminate the growth that comes through learning to choose good government? When God rules directly, do humans develop civic virtue, or become political children who never learn to govern themselves? Chapter 18: The Climate Crisis That Heaven Solves. Hurricane systems dissolve before making landfall as angels calm winds with songs of peace. Polar ice caps restore themselves overnight when seraphim breathe frost from heaven's throne rooms. The ozone layer repairs itself through heavenly chemistry that transforms pollutants into pure air faster than industries can produce contamination. Forests regrow in days rather than decades as cherubim plant seeds that mature through divine acceleration, their roots reaching deep enough to heal soil damaged by centuries of industrial abuse. Oceans clear as marine angels gather plastic waste into islands that transform into floating gardens that feed hungry nations. Coal power plants shut down not through government regulation, but because they become unnecessary when angels teach engineers how to harness divine energy that flows freely from heaven to earth. Solar panels become obsolete as communities learn to channel light directly from the source that powers all stars. Oil companies transform into environmental restoration corporations when their executives receive visions of Earth's intended beauty and choose profit through healing rather than destruction. Mining operations become archaeological expeditions that uncover divine treasures buried for humanity's eventual discovery, rather than scarring landscapes for temporary material gain. But the most profound change comes in humanity's relationship with creation itself. Farmers work alongside nature angels who teach crop rotation that enhances rather than depletes soil. Architects design buildings that grow like plants, their living walls breathing with the rhythms of divine life. Animal extinctions reverse as species thought forever lost, return through divine recreation, their DNA restored from heavenly archives where every creature ever made remains perfectly preserved. Endangered animals multiply under angelic protection that makes poaching impossible and habitat destruction self-healing. Yet even environmental paradise raises difficult questions. Does divine intervention in climate crisis teach humans stewardship or dependency? When heaven solves every ecological problem, do people learn to care for creation or assume God will always fix whatever they break? Chapter 19. The Soul's Eternal Question. In the quiet moments between miracles, when the angelic choirs pause their eternal song, a whisper echoes through every human heart. If evil never truly existed, is good still truly good? If Satan never fell to provide contrast, does holiness have meaning, or is it simply the natural state of beings who never learned they could choose differently? Sarah sits in her garden where flowers bloom perpetually under heaven's blessing, but her heart wrestles with questions no theology can answer. She has never experienced real temptation because demons don't exist to tempt her. She has never chosen virtue over vice because vice never presented itself as a genuine option. Her love for God remains pure, but she wonders, is it love at all if she never had the freedom to choose hatred? Children grow up seeing angels on every corner, miracles in every prayer, divine love flowing like water from inexhaustible springs. They cannot imagine a world where prayers go unanswered or where suffering serves any purpose. Their faith rests on sight rather than trust, their hope on certainty rather than endurance. Marriage counselors work with couples who never learnt to forgive because they never had anything serious to forgive. Therapists help people who struggle with purpose because every goal gets achieved through prayer rather than effort. Teachers train students who have access to all knowledge through angelic tutors, but wonder if wisdom requires the struggle of not knowing. The most profound spiritual question emerges not in seminaries, but in ordinary hearts. Does free will exist when only good choices feel possible? Can humans truly love God if they've never experienced life without divine presence? Is character formed through victory over temptation, or through something else entirely, when temptation itself has no supernatural champion? Even angels pause their worship to consider these mysteries. They remember their own choice to remain faithful when Satan's rebellion could have swayed them, but they wonder, would their love mean less if that choice had never been required? In this world without spiritual warfare, the greatest battle might be the one raging in every soul that asks, who am I if I've never had to choose who to become? Chapter 20. The War That's Still Coming. Deep in the archives of heaven's oldest libraries, where seraphim keep records written before time began, ancient prophecies speak of conflicts that make Satan's rebellion look like a child's tantrum. These texts, sealed until now, begin opening themselves as cosmic signs suggest that preventing one war may have enabled something far more terrifying. The scrolls describe entities so ancient they predate creation itself, beings that exist in the spaces between dimensions, feeding on the very possibility of existence. They speak of the deep ones who slumber in reality's foundations, waiting for the moment when heaven's attention turns elsewhere, when the cosmos grows too bright with divine love to notice the shadows gathering in forgotten corners of eternity. Astronomers using heaven's own instruments detect disturbances in distant galaxies where stars die not from natural causes, but from something that consumes light itself. Angelic patrols report encounters with presences that shouldn't exist, entities that make demons seem like guardians by comparison, creatures that whisper about the great dimming when all of creation's joy will be harvested like wheat. The most disturbing revelation comes through divine vision granted to a young prophet in Jerusalem. Satan's rebellion was never the ultimate threat to heaven's peace. It was a distraction, a cosmic sleight of hand that drew God's attention away from something stirring in the depths of non-existence itself, beings so alien to divine love that even fallen angels would flee in terror. As our timeline reaches the present day, signs multiply that these ancient enemies are awakening. Electronics malfunction in ways that suggest not demonic interference, but something far worse. Technology that begins forgetting how to exist. People experience moments of existential static, where they briefly cease to be, returning with no memory of the gap, but marked by something that makes angels weep. The final prophecy, written in script that burns the eyes of even seraphim to read, speaks of the day when creation itself will face its true test, not choosing between good and evil, but between existence and the hungry void that wants to unmake everything that ever was or could be. In preventing Satan's fall, heaven may have removed the one force chaotic enough, rebellious enough, dark enough to serve as an early warning system against threats that transcend the simple categories of righteousness and sin. The war that's coming won't be fought with swords of light against swords of darkness. It will be fought with the very power of being against forces that want to make being itself impossible. And in the growing cosmic silence where distant galaxies flicker and die, something vast and patient and utterly alien begins to smile with mouths that have never known the possibility of joy, as it prepares to teach heaven the difference between ruling over creation and protecting creation from what lies beyond all rules, all love, all hope of redemption. The question that haunts even God's throne: when the real war begins, will a universe that has known only light remember how to fight in darkness deeper than any Satan could ever dream?